All right, well, I'm Sara Carlson. I'm the Executive Director of the Willmar Area Community Foundation and the Sauk Center Area Community Foundation, and with me is Liz Cheney. And we'll be each doing just a little bit of an overview for you on the background of our community foundations and how that brought us to this topic today. But I'm just going to give you quickly a little bit of overview first about the Willmar Area Community Foundation and Sauk Center. So the Willmar Area Community Foundation is 21 years old. We are just shy of 100 funds and about $19.5 billion, depending on what day you look at the stock market. And one of the things that I think is particularly interesting about the Willmar Area Community Foundation around this particular topic of unrestricted assets is that from the day that our board started, they had a focus on unrestricted dollars. It was a big part of what they wanted to raise early on. And they were very successful in doing that through a couple of different campaigns. We'll talk a little bit about that. But probably the biggest takeaway that is meaningful for board members and staff who are in the room is that today, I mentioned we're just over $19 million. And almost half of that is unrestricted. So certainly some legacy gifts that are game changers in our world, and we'd be happy to share a little bit about that. But as I said, our board did not just wait for unrestricted assets to come. They went out and got them from the day that we began. So this has been part of the language that we have shared since the foundation started. And we always talk about unrestricted funds as part of our community impact fund. So we do say unrestricted, but we also talk about it as our community impact fund. And in Sauk Center, they are 4 years old. They are just shy of $3 million today. And for them, they are growing unrestricted funds. They have 26 funds, and they have had a donor who understands unrestricted step forward from the day they began and offer 2 dollar-for-dollar matches for all unrestricted funds. So it has really helped grow their unrestricted pool. And today their unrestricted pool is about just shy of $400,000. So that gives you some context for my experience, and I will invite Liz to come and share the same.
So, I need both?
You need both.
Oh, okay.
Yay.
I'll just hold it.
Just leave it there.
All right, can everybody hear me? Yes, great. Hi, Liz Cheney. I'm with Southwest Initiative Foundation. We are based in Hutchinson and serve the southwest corner of Minnesota. We're one of 6 regional foundations that were started in the 1980s by McKnight Foundation. I've been with the organization for 15 years, wearing multiple hats, of course, during that time, and in my current role for just over 4 years. In terms of context that I hope will be helpful to frame up comments today, our total assets exceed $90 million, and of that, just shy of $40 million is unrestricted permanent endowment fund for the organization. And 5%, our spending policy on that particular fund supports about 1/3 of our annual operating budget. We have about $29 million in donor restricted funds, like community foundation affiliates, donor advised funds, and the like. So for us, when we talk about growing unrestricted funds, we're really talking about our unrestricted and permanent endowment fund. We're really fortunate. I say it's a blessing and a curse to be in this situation because we do have a variety of funding sources to meet our mission, including that spending policy from the endowment fund. And it's a curse at the same time to layer endowment fund on top of essentially the operating and capacity building message.
All right. So the next thing we wanted to do here is to take the temperature of who is in the room. So just help us understand a little bit about who's in the room, because then we might tailor some of our messaging for you. So just by show of hands, who in the room would say you have a robust strategy to raise unrestricted funds for your community foundation? Andy Vanderbilt, hand in the air. There you go. All right. Who is brand new to raising unrestricted funds? Show of hands. Okay. How many of you currently have 100% participation from your entire board and staff to gift to your unrestricted fund? Okay. And how many of you have paid staff? All right. And of you, do you have 100% of your staff that give to your unrestricted fund? Andy Vanderbilt. Okay. All right. That helps us a little bit to sort of know what is your familiarity with what we're going to be talking about today. All right. So where do we begin? I'll tell you what you don't do, and it's here on the slide. So contrary to popular belief, you do not actually start by drafting a humdinger of a solicitation letter and sending it out to all of your friends. You don't target the 10 most wealthy people in your community who get targeted by everybody and go ask them to give you unrestricted funds. And you don't run a golf tournament or a road race or a gala or something of that nature to grow unrestricted funds. Those are strategies that certainly can be helpful, but that is not where you begin if you were at the starting line about unrestricted assets. And I think sometimes both nonprofits and foundations lose their way a little bit thinking, well, we'll just throw an event. And most of the time, events struggle to break even, unless you're really lucky, or there's so much work for your staff that and volunteer board members that that time and effort could be better spent using a little bit more pointed strategy. And so what we're going to talk with you a little bit about today is being a little bit more pointed in the strategies that you deploy. And so I'm going to have Liz come up because when we invited her to help us with this session today, we did so because they are at a really critical time in their organization about thinking about what's next for them in unrestricted fundraising. And so this will help you learn from her in real time about what she's actually doing in their shop. So Liz, come on up.
All right. Oh, how clever.
He is so smart. Love it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, and do you still have that? Fantastic. So here is the place to begin if you're starting for the first time, or in my case, really looking to reinvent and refresh what you're currently doing in this area. And it's not a really fun place to start, and I do want to share, this is the resource that I sought out when it was time to look at this in our shop. It's called Capital Campaigns, Strategies That Work. Don't be confused by the title. We're not running a capital campaign, but there's a lot of good stuff in here that I've lifted out for you in the slides. So where you start is called your case for support or your case statement. And it is the heart. It is the heart of your fundraising, whether you're doing a formal campaign, whether you're raising money for a project or a capital project, that type of thing. It's the heart of it. You have to start here if you want to have success. So what is the case for support? Well, it is a written document. It ensures everybody knows what you're raising money for. It focuses mostly on the why, and you need a little bit of how, and it's persuasive to your board of directors, your donors, volunteers. It's really a rally cry to join us in this work. It describes simply and in compelling terms the difference your campaign is going to make for your organization and beyond. So it's unfortunately not just about us, but it's about the difference the campaign will make in our corner of the world. So yes, it's unfortunately not about the organization's needs, but rather how what you're doing will change the world. This particular thing, this lofty case statement, is more difficult to write than you might think. And it's taken me more time than I thought it would take. So a couple of key elements. This is kind of some 101 stuff I want to share. You need to have a title, and this is really what's going to set the tone for your piece, capturing the spirit of what you hope to achieve. You need an introduction to describe the impact that you're going to have. And you need to use this as your hook to capture some attention. You need an argument, tell your readers more fully about what the organization is going to do and why it matters, why it needs to happen now. You want some organizational background in some cases. Why us? Explain, why you're poised to succeed. And here's the part where you can talk about your founding and your history. And so you can talk a little bit about yourself. Why now? You do need to convey a sense of urgency in fundraising. And this can be a little challenging in my shop because I'm raising money for a $40 million permanent endowment fund in which we spend 5% each year. And yet, there must be something that's time sensitive about with a successful case. Financial need, man, we got to talk about money. Yep, we absolutely can't be shy about talking about money. We need to tell people how much we need in this particular campaign or project or message. And then the close. You would be wise to call your readers to some sort of action. Otherwise, why are we doing this in the first place? A couple of tips based on my journey so far. It's important to be short and succinct, and yet you must elicit an emotional response of some sort. You can use stories and statistics. Some people really love that story component, and that really speaks to them, and you're going to have others that really want numbers. And I think it's wise to use a mix of both. You should absolutely weave in your mission, your vision, your values into your case statement. You should be optimistic and honest about your need and include that call to action. Design is important. You don't start there, but design is important. Design pulls it all together in a way that makes sure that your readers can read it and are interested. You maintain their interest. So consider the use of white space, easy to read fonts, bullets, headings, color, charts, photos. So here is what is happening in Southwest Initiative Foundation. This is the process I've lifted out of this book and customized for the unique organization that we are. Of course, it helps to, point the finger at somebody who's going to take on the role of your case statement. And in most cases, the best person to do this is going to be your lead fundraising person, if you have one. If you don't, gosh, my apologies. You can call me for some tips. But typically, your lead fundraising person is in the best position to start this process. And then once you have some content in a nice text document, you should work with someone to make it pretty and transform it into some kind of designed piece labeled draft. And so why might we do that? Labeling it draft.
So people know that they can get feedback.
Right, absolutely, thank you. We will print a small quantity, and then absolutely, we've already identified a short list of people who we're going to engage in a conversation about our draft case statement, starting with our board of directors. and then moving to constituents like founders of our organization, longtime loyal donors, staff, volunteers, donor prospects that don't know us very well, but they're certainly towards the bottom of that short list. So we have 13 people on our list, and plus 12 on our board of directors, because we're testing the idea, the message, the design. We're testing, and we're going to ask for feedback. And that's where the visit comes in. I think you want to have one-to-one conversations with those on your short list to ask for their feedback. And sometimes it might feel challenging to get a face-to-face visit with folks, but I think if it's framed up in a way where you're asking for help and feedback from a list of people who knows you well and cares about you, I think it should be not easy, but easier to get some face time with them in a genuine way to ask, what do you think of this idea and this message? Is it going to work, or will we fall flat? Because in fundraising, you know this adage: if you want money, ask for advice. If you want advice, ask for money, right? So then we're going to visit with all of our closest friends, ask for their feedback, incorporate the feedback that seems to, resonate with several, and then update the draft, reprint it, and start using it. And a couple of other things that are really important. You definitely must make your own gift first. So in my case, as the lead for this process, I'm absolutely giving at the level that we will ask others to support. I must ask and invite my board of directors. So in addition to looking at the draft case statement, when it's time to start using it, I must ask and invite them for their gift, and ask and invite the staff who work with me. And it helps to enjoy drinking coffee. So actually, when I moved into my 30s, that was one of the goals I had for myself, because I was not a coffee drinker, and yet I worked in the field of fundraising. It was sort of a challenge, and I had to practice drinking coffees so that I could sit with folks and have those conversations. True story.
I didn't actually know that about Liz, even though we worked together for a decade at the Southwest Initiative Foundation before I came to the Willmar Area Community Foundation. And I too did not drink coffee until I was past my 30s, just slightly past my 30s. But now I just like to say I like a little coffee with my cream. So as long as the donor doesn't see how much cream's going in, we're probably good. Okay, so you've heard a couple of common themes, really, that we've been talking about today. And part of what Liz and I want to do is not only give you, case study, textbook, like this is how you need to do that, but we also want to give you some takeaways that we believe you should be able to implement when you leave today. So you've heard us say multiple times, board must be engaged, board must be a messenger, board must give first. So if that is not happening in your current community foundation, I would have a little bit of soul searching time. I would have an open conversation with your board members, because if you harvest some information from your board members about why they're not giving to Unrestricted, that will tell you some of the roadblocks you're going to hit when you're talking to people who don't know about you well, or do know about you but don't know enough about what you do in the broader community. And it will also tell you whether or not you have clarity to start a case statement, or if you need to back up and start getting some of that clarity, because a case statement requires you to be really clear. Why are we raising it? What do we need it for? You heard Liz talk about some of those points. So you have to make sure that you and your board are on the same page about why do you need unrestricted assets. We all know that unrestricted assets are the best kind, right? Everybody in the room understands that unrestricted assets are the most powerful assets that we have in our toolbox because it allows us to pivot. And that's part of what I say when I talk to donors about unrestricted or giving to the Community Impact Fund, is that it allows a board of community leaders who will always perpetually be in place, whose job it is to have the pulse point of the community, to adjust and pivot to meet the needs of the community. When I and that donor do not know what the community is going to need 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, an unrestricted gift ensures that that gift will be most successfully used into perpetuity. And you have to believe that, you have to give some examples of that, and your board has to be behind that in order for that to really work. So as Liz said, we put the role of board versus staff for you there. Clearly, your board is the group that sets the direction. They are the ones who say, Sara, this is where we want you to go. How do we get the foundation there? They also approve budgets and all that kind of governing work, but they also need to finalize the case statement before you take it out to donors other than your test group. Okay? They need to help you identify prospects. And this is one of the things that I think both that we learned from the Willmar board and now have deployed in our work in Sauk Center and other subsequent foundations that are aligned with community giving, is that they help open the doors. We always say that there are key roles for a board member, right? And one of those board member roles not only is to support the organization financially, but it is also to serve as an ambassador, to open doors for staff or for the board members who are more comfortable making asks. Because not every board member is super comfortable doing that. So figuring out, if you're a volunteer board, who are the people who sit at this board table who are not afraid? When we started, we had 3 or 4 board members who were not afraid to ask anyone for anything, for any reason, for that matter. We're fortunate that many of them are still alive and working with our foundation. So if I have a particularly tough prospect, I always call one of them because they always know them. They'll usually go to coffee with me or say, hey, I want you to meet Sara. Can you just come on in here and she'll make you a cup of coffee? Because those relationships really matter. So figuring out how to deploy the strengths that you actually have, whether it's inside a staff or if you're not at the size yet where you have staff, how do you use your board strategically to do that work? And part of it is everybody knows someone or thinks they might know someone who would be either a good test subject for your case or would help educate you about the perceptions of the community foundation in the community. What would they need to know in order to make that kind of a gift? So don't hesitate, but also ask your board members for who should we be getting this case in front of when it's ready, and start your prospect list that way and ask them to help you with that. I've already talked about opening doors and accompanying us as staff. It's a really big deal. That's part of the best board governance that I can think of, is that the board members act in that ambassador role. We have always involved our boards in thanking donors. I am responsible. We make sure that they get their tax receipt. We make sure that they get a hand acknowledgement. But we also have our board writing hand notes on solicitation letters, on thank you letters. If I know that that board member brought that prospect, I make sure they know that a gift came from that prospect so that they too can join us in thanking that prospect for the gift. So be thinking about donors and board members in a circular sort of way. It's an ongoing relationship. And as Liz said, board and staff have to be the first gifts in the door. You don't ask anyone else if you're not willing to make the gift first. Staff, we've already talked about how we create the case statement, and if you don't have staff, thinking about who are the board members at the table who are willing to wade into this, who might have some gift of writing and have some creativity about layout and branding and those sorts of things. They would be the best team from your board to work on that. Staff or that lead board member are responsible for scheduling those appointments. and setting those up and following through on all of that. And as Liz also said, working with some of your known donors. Anytime we're going to try something in our foundations, I always run it past a few folks beyond just our board after I know that our board is down with it. And some of those folks are sitting in the room. You know, Ken Warner right over here is one of our founding board members. I often will say, hey, Ken, what do you think about this? Because he was there in the day. He knows what those assets were intended to do, but he also is really well positioned in the community to tell me if that's going to resonate or not. So know who that group is, and ask them for their advice. And if you heard Liz just a few minutes ago, often what happens when they're saying, I want your advice, I want your feedback, and then they say, well, this sounds awesome. What will it take to make that happen? Well, clearly we need to raise some resources, and often, if they are close friends of the foundation, they will say, you can count me in on that. It's the easiest ask ever. I didn't even have to say, would you consider? They just say, count me in. I'm down. So then they turn into an ambassador, not only a first giver, but an ambassador for your work as well. Staff clearly are responsible for managing all the asks and the follow-up and making sure that people get acknowledged and their tax receipts are out and that we're doing the kinds of things. Or if they say, hey, we're heading to Florida for a month, but we'll talk to you in about 6 weeks, somebody's got to remember to call them in 4 weeks to schedule something 2 weeks out. So it always requires that kind of follow-up. Clearly staff or your infrastructure provider needs to be helping you with the gift process and receipting and all of that sort of thing. Staff also are responsible for developing reports and giving reports back to the board on the metrics. How are we doing? Have we raised, are we at 50%? Are we at 20%? Are we finding that it's more cumbersome than we thought? We might need to tweak some more. That is the staff's responsibility to give you that. And again, first gifts, no exceptions. And we always say we do not have a give-get threshold at community giving, so we don't expect a board member to make a certain size gift in exchange for being on the board. I know some boards do that. That is just not part of what we've always done. We just simply say that we expect that if this is part of how they're serving their community, that their gift to the community foundation would be commensurately sized to their budget to show their commitment. So, if they're normally giving $10,000 a year into the community, and this is the board they serve on, we would ask them to be thinking about more than $100 gift to support the campaign.
Can I jump in quick? Just quickly, and at Southwest Initiative Foundation, we used to have an expectation that our board members give at a certain level, our key recognition level at $1,000 or more per year, and that has changed. Today we talk about a gift that's meaningful to you, and that does look different for our board members, and it feels like a more inclusive way to share the fundraising message and invite people into our work.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's exactly what we have found as well, that when you ask for $1,000, you'll have some donors who will give you the $1,000, and then you'll have some donors who say, I can't do $1,000, so I guess I'm out. When in reality, if you just say, we're asking for a gift that's meaningful to you, they will figure that out. And we've had board members who have come in and said, I love this, we're in for $10,000. And we've had other board members who say, what's meaningful to me and my family budget right now is $350. And we're equally pleased with each gift because we know that it's coming from the place that's most genuine to them, okay? So that's just how we handle that in our shop. We also do offer ACH giving as part of this, so they can do budgeted drafts from their checkbook to accumulate to the goal gift that they want to give at the end of the year if that's easier for them. So that might be something else for you to investigate back at home, is what is your capacity to do that? What would that look like? Do you have an online giving platform or a portal so that donors can right-size their gift and budget for it over time? All right, so we're gonna actually, first of all, we're all gonna pray that this technology works, like always. But I'm gonna cue this up a little bit. This is a very short video clip of our very first donor to the Willmar Area Community Foundation. Her name is Vi Osherman. Her very first gift was $400,000 to meet the Otto Bremer Foundation, now the Otto Bremer Trust's match. And she gave it unrestricted, okay? She then followed up with a designated fund in her estate plan and then left another percentage of her estate unrestricted because she was so pleased with how the foundation was progressing. And it's just the sweetest little story. It's like a minute long. And please forgive us, it's like, you know, late 1990s technology. So she is now passed, sadly, so we can't get her back on video again. But Liz, there should just be a play point in there.
Like Usher, a retired teacher, is changing lives in Willmar through her fund at the Willmar Area Community Foundation. It provides seed money for social and cultural needs in her community.
It has provided one of the greatest sources of satisfaction that I've ever known. I feel that at least my little nook is going to be better because I was here. And that's very satisfying. Along with that, 15th of April, I have another blessing. My tax bill is nominated.
Isn't she cute? Oh, I just could eat her with a spoon. She's so cute. But that's a great example of a donor telling another donor the story about why they made an unrestricted gift, right? So you can cue things up and then use a donor story. How many of you have a video or audio donor story that you can use like this? Okay. So that might be another tool for you to think about. You know, iPhones can do some pretty amazing videos without a ton of editing necessary. So when you get people who give to the unrestricted campaign, getting them on tape and talking about why they give, and then letting other donors see people that they know who have made that gift can be a pretty impactful thing, and it doesn't have to cost you an enormous amount of money to have that available. You can't pick up your donor roadshow and take them everywhere, but you can take them on your phone and show someone, or you can show them something. And having these legacy stories is really important in our shop. We always try and get legacy stories, at least in writing, from donors who have left us unrestricted assets in particular, or perpetual gifts in particular. But that little story is particularly powerful. And let me just say that if you don't have a story yet, and you think having something like this would be helpful to you, borrow ours. You have carte blanche permission. So go to communitygiving.org and look under Legacy Stories and just look up Vi Osherman. She's not under the cutest little teacher ever, but she should be. But just look up Vi Osherman and say, this is an example of someone, a really common everyday hero who did something incredibly heroic in her lifetime and was our very first unrestricted donor in Willmar, who was then stewarded to make a second unrestricted gift at passing. All right, Liz.
Yeah, I'm gonna show you, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's not in there.
Okay,
So we'll show them.
no worries. I'm gonna pull it up quick. This draft that I've been working on, I'm gonna grab it for you.
While Liz does that, I'm going to bring out an example of the Community Impact Fund ask from our sister foundation at the Central Minnesota Community Foundation. Our case statement in Willmar is in the same process that Liz is just talking about. It needs a refresh. So Liz can talk while I pass this around.
I'm going to try. Okay, so you heard me say I'm like shoulders deep in this work right now. It's really hard. It's taking me way longer than I thought it would. I would love to share a paper copy of this with you. I would love nothing more than that, but it's just not ready, and my board hasn't seen it yet. So I did want to pop it up so you can take a look at how I took some of those best practices, those foundational pieces of a case statement, and woven them into the complexities of my organization accordingly. So I'm going to scroll to my inner spread real quick.
Can I do it for you, Liz?
Would you love to?
I surely would love to.
that.
You can boss me around.
So for those that might know us a little better than others, our logo treatment is in the background of this design. Because as we test this and as we roll it out, really the folks that we envision joining us are pretty traditional. They have this long relationship with the organization, and something like our logo feels timeless and classic in terms of design. We started somewhere else that felt very modern and sort of whimsical, and it just didn't land right when I saw it the first time. This feels a lot better. So we've got some pictures, we have some numbers, we have a graph. We've clearly outlined an annual gap of at least $500,000 if we're going to do and sustain what we've already been doing. Okay, so this is our message. May not make sense if you don't know us well, and that's okay, but for this group of people, they know us pretty well. And let's see, what else would I want to point out? Then there's a last page, nothing too fancy, and then there's actually a separate insert piece. So in all of my technology, this is what it looks like. There's tape on here, right? And then there's this. So this is the piece that's really specific to what we're asking, which is a specific giving level that we invented for ourselves back in 2004, and we think it's time for a facelift. It's called Growing Home Circle. You see that language. That's going to resonate with the audience that we're using. So again, this is a giving level. It's recognition at $1,000. We're proposing increasing that and changing the use of the gift. And that's the idea that we're testing. So verbally, we've tested this idea with 2 donors. It just sort of felt like the right thing to do in a conversation. And in both situations, both donors said, cool, count us in, here's $1,500 this year. So we're not really ready technically for that, but we absolutely accepted their extra $500 with a grateful heart. So, can you, on the other tab, that is this piece. So this is the piece that we envision would experience maybe more changes based on feedback than the other piece, but we don't know, right? We're kind of making it up as we go, but it's been good so far and still not printed in draft form. So I did want to share that with you and would certainly offer for those that, if you're interested in seeing the near final draft, bring me your card and I'll send it to you when we have printed copies. I'd be happy to do that. And that's it.
All right. Okay, so, wow, I don't need to go do leg day on that leg now. It's good. So what questions do you have? We're trying to be mindful of time and getting you moving again quickly, but we've also raced through this. So what questions do you have? We're happy to stand for them.
I just had a clarifying question. Are you looking at this as an annual campaign, or are you looking at this as a multi-year campaign?
For us, it is always an annual ask. It's a regular ask.
So
We
are
don't.
you updating your case statement annually then?
We hope not to do a major overhaul of the case statement every year, maybe every 3-ish years. I know that what I passed out from CMCF, that's really their start. And I would imagine that as they learn, they'll tweak and adjust. But we gave you that because we wanted you to see that it's not like this glitzy, big, expensive thing that you have to create. It can be something that your hometown printer can actually help you lay out and print. It can be done relatively economically. You can actually do it on your own printer at the office if that's what works better for you. It's not so much about all of that. The message has to be right. They have to engage the heart, because people give to people. They don't give to projects. So they have to connect to you as the people, whether it's board or staff, and they have to believe that their partnership with you will change their community. At community giving, we always say that's what we do as a community foundation. We help generous people change lives and transform communities. That's what we do. So if you want to help them understand that giving an unrestricted gift to your community impact fund increases your grant-making capacity, it increases your staffing capacity, it increases whatever it is that you're looking to increase, you have to have the message figured out so that you can do that. And so when my board member, Andy, is sitting next to somebody and the conversation slowly starts to shift and he senses that there might be a moment where they're genuinely interested in knowing more about the community foundation, that Andy's got at least a working internalized script enough to say, gosh, maybe we should go have coffee with Sara and she could tell you this, all day long, every day if you wanted. But, we want them all to feel equipped that way. So every couple of years, probably it'll need a little refresh. Liz, are you thinking you're going to do yours every year?
Okay, so truth. We also do annual goal setting and annual asks to our board. But the truth be told on our case statement, we've been leaning on a 15-year-old case statement to date. And it's been serving us pretty well. I mean, we've had other pieces we've done in-house, one-pagers, to put the ask out there as a leave behind, but we've been leaning on the sort of crux of that case statement for a long time. And it's one of the reasons that I really started at the beginning, because it felt like it was time to really give it fresh eyes and a facelift. So I would envision that the main piece that's taped together today might see a couple of updates, and then the insert piece might be updated annually so that it's relevant and has some more timely information in it. That insert piece we would print in-house, so super economical. It's not overly designed. So that's how we've approached it. But I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. Yes.
So I'm a financial advisor, so I'm not a foundation person. I deal with donors all the time. If people have had a generous heart in their lifetime, they've already given to a lot of places and they already have charities they're going to support. And so unrestricted doesn't fit. And it's not going to happen. It's not going to fit. Okay, that's not necessarily true. That is not necessarily true, but it is broadly true. So you've got a challenge that if you're going to talk to people that are donative intent, they probably already have charities that they're giving to now, and maybe even through the foundation they're giving to, or they have it already in their estate, and you're not going to get very far with them on unrestricted. However, you might, but it can't be done in paragraphs. If you're going to have a piece that sends out paragraph after paragraph, like 3-4 sentences in a paragraph, wrong answer. People aren't going to respond to it. What will they respond to? 15 immediate needs that you've done in the last 10 years. That they will look at that and be impressed. So if you're going to sell, talk to somebody who sells. I mean, this piece is a sales piece. Talk to somebody who sells and see what they do. That's what they do. They give hard-hitting, factual data that raises people's eyebrows to go, wow. Now, I do have these 6 charities I do, but wow, there was this new roof we had to do over here at Catholic Charities in St. Cloud. I mean, oh my gosh. That was an immediate need. Somebody's got to step up on stuff like that. Maybe that would be me. Well, that's great, but if you just list stuff, words, okay, people. So I'm just giving you a little hint on salesmanship, and if you're drafting a piece, make sure you tell them what you've done. You know, tell your story, and don't tell it in paragraphs. It's list it down the side of the page. I mean, if you want to do some of that, it could be important. Just list it down the side of the page. Just 15, 20 of them, and it will. People will stop. They won't throw it away. If you're going to mail it, they won't throw it away. They'll actually stop and look at it.
Mhm.
So the other quick thing is taxes. So people are giving less because of the tax act, and so I don't know if you're fitting that into your materials. If you are, it makes it difficult because the tax act changes every 2 years, or every 4 years. It changes constantly. Right now, it's a problem for charities. With the tax act, you can't deduct these gifts unless you get past major thresholds.
And
like
that's
five-
why it's great to use a donor advised fund
Right.
to do your
Yes.
stacking of gifts over
Yes.
2 to 3 years.
So I think the point he's,
There's a sales opportunity inside the current tax act. And so
Sure.
we get.
For sure,
If you
yeah.
don't refer to it, because you don't want to change the materials, because it'll all change probably in 1 or 2 or 3 years. Okay, I kind of understand that, but a lot of people are going, I give up. I can't deduct it unless I do 5 or 10 or 15 grand. I'm nowhere near that, so the heck with it. Let's go to the beach.
right. So I think the point that he's making is that, and I want to underscore, is that this is a session specifically about unrestricted assets. That doesn't mean that's the only thing we're talking to donors about, or it's the only work that we're doing. We certainly talk to financial advisors, professional advisors all the time, and they get bullets. They get impact stories, they get bullets. They get the factual information that equips them to be the best, to provide the best service to their client wherever their client is in this process. And some donors will certainly, are more open to the notion of unrestricted. And this is not going to be rocket science for most of you, but 90% of our unrestricted gifts in our communities come from folks who are 55 and older, no children, or don't want to inherit their heirs because their heirs are doing well and they're concerned about actually handicapping their heirs financially. So they start thinking about who's going to hold my legacy. Unrestricted is a perfect spot for someone who wants to know that. So working with your professional advisors so that they understand this is just as important as engaging some donors who are open-minded to the notion of unrestricted assets and what it means to your foundation. What we're giving you today is architecture for how to think about, consider, and prepare for unrestricted asks in a more robust sort of way. That doesn't mean that neither of us are involved in day-to-day sales to those folks. That's not what actually wasn't the intention of today's session, but we do that. So if we could be helpful to you, you have our contact information. We'd be happy to talk with you a little bit more about the hows or the whens or the whys, but this is not the only thing that we do. Clearly, we're working on donor advised funds and bunching and bundling, and we're talking to their financial advisors who are sending them in the door saying, I need to offload $36,000 this year so I can be above the line and then gift out my 12 for the next 3, and then I'm going to bunch and bundle again. We do that on a day-to-day basis. IRA rollovers, transfers, QCDs, all of that. So yeah, the landscape that what we're doing is changing for sure. But we still need to take up the very laudable work of explaining to community members why unrestricted assets matter, whether they gift them to us or they gift them to a nonprofit unrestricted, it still floats boats in our community.
I'd give examples then.
Other
The
questions?
example was where you said there's a roof. If you have people that are giving unrestricted gifts to that organization, they're not going to be in jeopardy when the roof needs to be
Mhm, exactly.
You're going to have
No,
those
it's
assets.
evidence, it's evidence of what you've done though. See, that's what intrigues people. Well, they've actually done 15 of these things. Nobody knows that. They don't know that you've done it. So if you tell them, here's 15 projects we've done in the last 10 years in St. Paul, they're going to go, oh my goodness.
So I don't have this. I don't have this in the slide, but I'm happy to show you a piece that we just did that actually is like a mini report card to the community about what it is that we've been doing and what we've been working on and why we're inviting them to support our work. So we have time for one more question in the back.
Just a quick logistical question. Will this
It is available, and I think it's inside your booklet, the website address where you can find that. I'm looking at April in the back, who's madly nodding at me. So I believe that that's accurate, that it will be available. But if for some reason it's not, feel free to email me. My contact information is in there, and I will give it to you. All right, and I saw one more hand. Since that was a quick one.
I just wanted to know how this fits into if you're also doing an annual mailing. What kind of, or are you finding that most of what you're doing to meet your unrestricted needs annually are through face-to-face?
Well, I would say that there's always room for a mailing, certainly. That might be a tool that you use around unrestricted assets as well. When you're doing a case and you're trying to educate people about it, face-to-face is always going to be best, because then you can organically take the conversation wherever, they want to know, what have you done? Now you can tell them. That it's hard to do in a letter that doesn't turn into a 15-page missive that they're never going to read, right? So you have to think about it. We certainly do an annual campaign letter. It is well-timed, though. So we have our celebration of philanthropy is always at the beginning of October. Our letter is ready to go. It's pre-signed, and our board has already written hand notes before that event happens. And then we just need to, I just go in and customize with notes like, it was really lovely to see you. Let's follow up and chat about that donor advised fund, whatever. We add in the people that were never on our mailing list before that came to the gala. And then the event, that solicitation is in their hands within 10 days. So that our gala is not a silent auction, live auction. It's not a fundraiser. It's a celebration of what's good about living in this community and the people who make it fantastic. We give them a top-notch experience and then tell them what we're up to. I never ask them from the podium. I instead showcase people who have done amazing things in the community that look just like them. And then we turn around and we invite them to be one of those hometown heroes that gifts us the resources to pivot and do what we need to do. So we could send that letter any time of the year, but we send it within 10 days of that event because we know it will connect the heart and the head and their experience, and those that maybe have never given us an unrestricted gift before are going to be more inclined to understand why that unrestricted gift would be important. So we're happy to hang out for a few minutes, and I'll be around all day. So will you please join me in thanking Liz for being part of our panel?
And Sara.
And what is next is you are heading to where?